because I'll bring you one.
Okay.
We don't want you to be excluded.
I don't want to be excluded.
After all, this is an inclusive church.
But if one person has to be excluded, I'll be the one.
Oh, no, we don't want you to be excluded.
Okay.
All right, that's good. All right, well, good morning. Good morning. It's the appointed hour. So I will not spend a lot of time introducing our wonderful guest because we want to get right to what she has to say. But I will just say Margaret Seidler is a retired organization and leadership development consultant, a national conference speaker, and author. She is from Charleston, and we are just honored and thrilled to have her here at Good Shepherd this morning. And she's going to tell us what all she's going to talk about, and I don't want to spoil the surprise. So, welcome, Margaret Seidler.
Thank you. It's great to be up here in Somerville, all the way from West Ashley. It used to be that we had to have a passport. Up here, it's not like that anymore. I want to thank George and Mary Sue McDaniel. They're our good friends. My husband Bob is here with me. And I also want to acknowledge Polly Shepherd, who is just was right on Frick Lane, right here in Somerville. And she's a good friend of mine, too. And so she came to support me this morning and to see her good friend, George. So thank you. So my understanding is that you all have been having some conversations last month about conflict in personal relationships and how to deal with that. Is that right? That was sort of your series last month. And this month is to talk about civil discord. Anyone familiar with that? Well, I actually started my career in conflict resolution back in 1992, so this is something that while I'm retired is near and dear to my heart, and is particularly near and dear to my heart because of where we find ourselves culturally right now as a country. So I was invited to come up here and to give you some ways to look at the world differently, and maybe even some ways to language yourself differently, so that we can keep discordance from turning into hate. Is that of interest to anybody?
Yes.
Okay. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to hear from you all first. So I'd just like to know, we're going to list these issues and then we'll come back to them within the hour and work some more on it. But I was really curious about what are some of the issues or situations that you're facing or have faced in the past couple of years that you feel are polarizing. They're ones where people just get on one side of the aisle, the other, like, right? Because we'll come back and actually explore one of your issues in a different way. So a couple of words, what are some kinds of issues that you see as discordant that are common in our communities or in this community? Politics, okay. Any kind of specific example around politics?
Republican versus Democrat, they
Okay.
have changed drastically.
All right, Republican versus Democrat, okay. What are some other specific issues that people are masks? Vaccines.
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, I know, we've all been in the same place for the last year and a half. What else? Anything else that you think? Yes, sir.
Churches being all-inclusive.
Churches being all-inclusive. Is running out of ink. Hold on.
Churches being non-inclusive,
Okay, hold on.
which is why we're here.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with your situation. I was raised in Grace Episcopal down on Wentworth Street, so. Okay, so inclusive and non-inclusive. What else?
Gun safety versus gun rights.
Okay.
Oh, so much.
Gun safety versus gun rights. Okay.
They're moving a gun store from Mount Pleasant to West Ashland.
Okay, so moving a gun store, why is that an issue?
I guess Mount Pleasant will have to come across the bridge to
Oh,
get
Lord.
gun.
Okay, all right, well, so this is really helpful. So we've got a few that we can work with later on. So we'll come back to these. What I want to do is I want to have you take a personal assessment, and we're going to use this as a way for me to explain to you a methodology that I've been using for, gosh, a little about, I guess, 20 years now in polarizing issues. So if everybody's got this and got a pen, right? Everybody's got a handout that says individual preferences, and you've got a pen. Anybody not have one? We need two more right here, Bob. This is my able assistant, Bob Seidler. He's been my assistant for almost 36 years. Yes, exactly. So this is going to be a three-part assessment. So please don't go ahead of me if you would, because I really want to make a point of what each part is. Are we good over there?
Yeah, we're good. Make it one more copy.
Oh, here, you can have my copy. I can do this for you.
Okay. Then we're good.
Yeah. So, on your handout, it basically says, and I'll read from yours, Ed, if that's all right. It says this is called individual preferences. So here are the instructions. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Notice that the two columns on the page are related. The items in the left-hand column are related to the corresponding item in the right-hand column. So, for example, activity and rest are related. So what I want you to do is indicate which of these two items you prefer. So in general, when you live your life, do you prefer to live it through activity or rest? And you need to circle your choice, one or the other. Just in general, how do you prefer to live your life, through activity or rest? Just circle it, don't go any farther. One or the other.
Even though that's changed.
Just circle your preference, please. Yes, ma'am. This is the point in time. Today. All right, now, you've got 10 more sets of pairs, and this is going to be a timed part of the assessment, and you only have 60 seconds to do these next 10 choices, either the item in the left-hand column or the corresponding item in the right-hand column, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to think about yourself in your lives. It could be your church life, it could be your home life, whatever you want to choose, and I want you to think about when you're interacting with other people, which is your preference when you're interacting with others. And so, for example, when you're interacting with others, do you prefer to focus on task, or do you prefer to focus on relationship? Do you prefer to focus on being candid, or do you prefer being tactful? All right, so when you make these choices, I haven't started the time yet. When you make these choices, I want you to do what is truly honest for you, not what you wished you were, but what's actually, right? What's really true for you now, today, in 2021. And you must choose either the item in the left-hand column by circling it, or the corresponding item in the right-hand column by circling. Are you ready? Set, go. 60 seconds. You've got about 30 seconds. $15. Just look at me if you have completed so I'll know. Okay, time is up. Now, I'm going to give you the third part of this assessment, and before you do anything, I want you to really listen to my instructions, because sometimes people get confused, and I want to make sure this is an important part of the assessment, and that you get it, that you understand what I'm saying before you act on it. So, not activity or rest, but the 10 pairs that you just did. What I want you to do is put an asterisk by the one that you circled if that one was a strong preference of that one over the other option. So, for example, with me between task and relationship, I am absolutely cast. You can ask my husband. Cast. I didn't have to like go, oh, is it task or is it relationship? It's like, it is task. And so only put asterisks by those where there are strong preferences. They're kind of like no-brainers. This is who I really, really am. It's like, if I got a choice between the two, I am going for that one most of the time, all right? You could have 0 asterisks. You could have 10 asterisks. There are only strong preferences, no right or wrong answer. Go ahead and do that now. Asterisks, please. And then I'm just going to come around. I won't read them, I promise. Remember, you can have 0 asterisks, or you only need to do words with a real strong preference one or the other. Okay. Everybody finish with that part. I'm really glad that George invited me to be here today. That's all I got to say.
Do we need more time? Do we need 3 sessions?
We may need more sessions. Just kidding. So let me ask you this question. How many of you would like to live? Raise your hand. Live, L-I-V-E, and not die today.
Okay.
So we're all in agreement that we all want to live. Yes? And we all don't want to die today. Okay. Well, there are 2 things that we need to make sure that we do in order for that not to occur. The bottom part, the downside, right? And that is we need to inhale, and we need to what? Exhale. And so what we know is that inhale gives us something very positive. So it has a lot of value. It gives us oxygen, right? And on the other hand, exhale, what? Helps us expel CO2, right? So if we want to live and we don't want to die, we need to both inhale and exhale. And we need to do it on an ongoing movement between one and the other, even though they may seem like they're competing. Because what if I said, I am no longer exhaling. I think inhaling is the right way to go. And I'm not going to exhale anymore. I'll show you exhalers. So I'm standing there in my righteous inhale. And I'm inhaling, and I'm inhaling, and I'm inhaling. All of a sudden, what happens? My lungs burst, and I'm forced to what? Exhale. On the other hand, exhalers go, I'm giving up inhaling. I'm not with that inhale crowd anymore. I'm just going to exhale because that's the way to live and not die. So they were. All of a sudden, what happens? Too much of a good thing gets what? Turns into negative. So all of a sudden, you just have to come back and inhale. Right? So we call inhale and exhale poles or values in a polarity, right? And what we know biologically is that we cannot just inhale or exhale. We must inhale and exhale. And thank goodness, until maybe the last year, a lot of us didn't need as much help breathing, right? Doing that. I mean, the pandemic really put inhale and exhale in the present forefront of my mind. So this thing that I call polarity is a supplementation, not a replacement, for traditional problem solving, which requires either or thinking. Okay? So in our culture, we know that we spell cat, what? C-A-T. And you ask me to spell cat, I can spell it, we got that right, we move on. 2 plus 2 is, we can move on. Apples fall down or up trees, right? Murder in our culture is right or I mean, these are just problems to solve. We know that they have a singular answer. We can go on and move on to something else in our culture. What I learned when Bob and I lived in Minnesota, which is hard to believe that a Charleston girl could ever have lived in Minnesota, and it took me moving to Minnesota to find this out, because I'm from a long line of either-or thinkers, 8th generation Charlestonian, right?
Yeah.
And believe me, I was taught certain things right, certain things wrong. My father did not recognize that some things aren't either-or, and some things are more complicated or more complex or more chronic, and they require a different kind of thinking, which is where you hold two opposing views simultaneously and remain functional. Okay? So how many of you circled activity in your test? How many of you circled activity? All right, who circled rest? Okay, y'all are wrong. You're obviously in the minority, so you can't possibly be right. I mean, that's how I was raised. They're not like us, so they are. Thank you, you know this drill. Okay? So when I moved to Minnesota, I met Dr. Barry Johnson, who changed my life, and I went up to him after I was working on a second master's degree, and I walked him next and I said, Dr. Johnson, I'm going to follow you to the end of this earth, and I have been. And I said, and I'm going to take this thing we call polarity management or polarity thinking to the world. And so when Bob and I moved back home 21 years ago, we have spent a considerable amount of time trying to take this and supplementation thinking to what is traditionally, Charleston, I cannot speak for some of them, an either-or society, okay? So what Barry Johnson came up with back in the 1990s was a way to make visible to everybody the complexity so that we can, in fact, instead of getting polarized, we can unify. Anybody interested in that? Okay? So we're going to use another biological example because we all can understand that. And we're going to use activity and rest. Okay? So this is called a polarity map. And so the polarity map has two, I call them poles. This is something that we value, right? Something that we prefer in life. They're both positive and or neutral. There's no negative names here, so they're equally appreciated. There's equity in this. And so in these two poles, there's a greater purpose statement, something that would be that common ground that might bring these two competing poles together. Right? So if I wanted to get the best of activity and rest, what would I be trying to achieve? Would it be something like to live a healthy life? Would that be anybody interested in living a healthy life? Okay. So that was something rest people could do. Are you interested in a healthy life too? Yes? Activity people, are you interested in that? Okay. So that is something that at the end of the day we can all agree that we want. Even though some may say activity is the way to go and others may say rest. So we would just say to live a healthy life. Can y'all read my handwriting at all? Because what I notice is I'm getting older and my handwriting is getting worse. And then down here at the very bottom is something we call the deeper fear. And this is the total opposite of the unifying thing. This is a thing that will unify us. It would just unify us in wanting to avoid something at all costs. So instead of living a healthy life, maybe it's to live what? Death? Okay. Chronic sickness and death. Okay? All right. Chronic sickness and death. And death. Oh boy. Sunday morning. So, there are 4 quadrants in all complex systems that we map this way. And there are 2 positive quadrants where you get positive results, and then there are 2 quadrants where you get negative results. So you're going to help me complete this, okay? So, if I want to live a healthy life, or if we want to live healthy lives, and we prefer activity, what are some of the positive results that we might get from focusing on activity? Positive results that we might get by focusing
Physical fitness.
physical fitness. Hang on one second. Physical fitness, sorry. Fitness, what else?
Intellectual stimulation.
Intellectual stimulation.
Energy.
Proficiency.
Okay, energy, proficiency. Okay, that's great. Those are all I need, proficiency for this quadrant. You understand where this is going, right? On the other hand, if we are focusing on rest to live that healthy life and avoid chronic illness and death, what are some of the positives that we get from rest? And we know they're going to be really different from activity, yes?
We
So-
regenerate at rest.
We regenerate. What else? What are some other positives?
Peace.
Peace, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What are some other positives? I want to hear from this rest. The rest wisdom over here.
Enjoyment.
Enjoyment.
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Then you have to ask, can you enjoy the health or
Okay, so someone just said, can't we enjoy activity? So let's clarify then. If we've got enjoyment over here, let's clarify more specifically. Thank you, that's very appropriate. Enjoyment from what? From rest.
what we've done?
Renewal.
Or what we have.
Reflection, enjoyment and reflection.
Yeah, the quietness of rest.
Okay, so the quietness. So we're enjoying the quietness. And that would be different from enjoying the exhilaration or the endorphins of activity. So, there are also potential negatives in this thing that we call activity and rest. So let's say that in the example here that I say, I'm not going to do any rest, those rest people don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to do activity, activity, activity. So if all I did was focus on activity and got no rest, what might be some negatives that might happen to me? All activity, no rest.
Sore muscles.
Sore muscles.
Burnout.
Burnout. What?
Illness.
Illness. Illness from what? Illness from exhaustion. What's another one? Injuries.
Yeah. Frantic.
Frantic.
Lack
Okay.
of quality time with others.
Lack of quality time with others, so it might impact relationships. How about if we flip the coin, we said, I don't like that activity thing, I'm gonna rest. And all I did was rest and I got no activity. What are some negatives that might happen? What? Weight gain. Ooh, I've been there. Weight gain. Weight gain. What else?
Unemployment. Illness.
Unemployment. Illness from what?
Diabetes.
Might get diabetes as an
From
example.
lack of eating too much and not exercising.
You eat too much.
Slothful.
You've been sloth.
Sloth.
So everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So in an either or world, we could have too much of one or too much of the other. In a both and world, right, where we have the word and right here, what we're going to do is we're going to try and be more conscious of what's going on in our bodies, and we want to, over time, make sure that we get the best of activity, and instead of coming all the way down here and experiencing these, that we also can recognize that they're the benefits of rest, so that instead of being negative, that we actually have this ongoing oscillation, getting the best of both and avoiding the negatives of each. That makes sense. So this may not be brand new for some of you. Maybe you think this way, but I will tell you, it was like I had been struck by a bolt of lightning when Barry Johnson told me about this. Because I was an activity person. You know, these rest people, they were just what? So, what I want you to do is I'm going to ask you in just a second to spend a couple minutes with the person next to you. And if it ends up being 3 people, it can be 2 people or 3 people. I want to give you a few minutes, like 3 or 4 minutes, to talk about the results of your personal assessment based on what we've just covered. So, anywhere you have an asterisk on your self-assessment, anywhere you have an asterisk, that is where you are more likely to stick with this particular preference and not go over to the other preference, which means you're more likely to experience the weaknesses that come from this strength. Does that make sense? Okay. That doesn't mean it does happen. It just means you're most vulnerable, because what will happen is you may be somewhat blind to the positives of the other pole, because when you think about, well, for me, when I think about people who like to rest, I think about lazy, I think about weight gain. I don't necessarily think about the beautiful peace and reflection and those kinds of things that come. So what I want you to do is have a conversation, take about 3 or 4 minutes about your asterisks. And is this affirming for you, or is this a surprise? I'm not going to ask you to share your test results with the group, okay? We're going to move on, because this is personal stuff. Take about 3 or 4 minutes. What do your assessment results say to you about yourself? Do they confirm certain things are true for you? Does it surprise you? Get going.
I've done this one, so I did, a while ago, I did a career counseling where I did the most in-depth Myers, deep dive, but some of the things are, yeah, so like planning, like this one came up in I look at a problem and we'll use circles and circles and come up with all different plans, and then I need someone or a deadline to go to implement it. And so what's it? Analysis by paralysis? Yeah, paralysis by analysis. Yeah, and anything else that's good? The flexibility. I think it kind of goes with the planning and the, wanting to have options, and to sort of fly by the seat of the pants and see what happens, and not necessarily have a specific task that's going on. Hey, Dad.
Hey, you got Catherine and Rebecca just got here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll.
Yeah, a little bit. Exactly what you said.
Okay, folks, let me get everybody's attention.
I agree.
Smart man.
So I don't want to know what you talked about, because this is not a counseling session. Were there any insights there? Yes? I can't, because I'm asking you to nod your head or shake it, or insights? Yes, sir.
We had lots of different things, and of course realizing at the end that it's it's like, none of that's really wrong, it's just a different way of looking at it.
Amen.
And
Amen. So, there are two rights that we want to go after, and there are two negatives that we want to avoid, right? So, one of the things that I was, when I first took this test, or assessment, when I took it about 21 years ago, or 23 years ago, I took it and I did all the preferences on the left-hand column, and then I put asterisks by every single one. My husband said, "You're sometimes wrong, but you're never in doubt." I know, God love you, and so I know what would happen for me. I was a manager at SCP&G back in the late 80s and the early 90s, and I remember when I got recruited there, my mother said, "Oh, Dolan, I'm so proud of you, got you a man's job." and so I did it. I had this big swagger and everything, and so what I learned though, like 15 years later, was that I would start off on task, and they'd go, "That Margaret Seidler, she can get," or "Margaret Thorne, she can get more done than we love her." And then about 6 months later, they started what? Hating me. Because I was cold, uncaring, blah, 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 no relationship. And so it was just amazing to me when I moved up to Minneapolis to recognize that being a really effective human being, whether in a leadership role or a followership role, is about having access to both, right? Instead of getting in conflict and making the other person wrong. So one of the things that I did, so you'll notice, I went to your website. If you were my client and I was still working, I would just come in here without like studying your website, right? And so I did, and I was really pleased with some things that I saw, and I wanted to acknowledge that. There were a couple of polarities, right? Pairs that I saw in there, interdependent values that are needed over time to create something greater. And there were two that I pulled off your website. One was worship is traditional and joyful. I grew up in Grace Church, it was traditional. It's not joyful. And then the one that I really love the most is your ministries. And it's community outreach and pastoral care within the parish. And so Bob, thank you Bob, that's my brilliant husband, he said, "Why don't you bring the Managing Polarities in Congregations book?" Right? And Barry Johnson and Roy Oswald published this probably about 7 years ago. It was part of the Alban Institute. Yeah. And so, this gives me a little chills. I was so excited for you all. So here's a polarity map that's all filled out. And the higher purpose, or the greater purpose, is a thriving congregation. And deeper fear down here is a declining congregation. And the two poles are in-reach and outreach. And I said, well, all of those thinkers already here. They're not like I was 20 years ago, and it was something that was new. So I'm going to give you all this book. I realized that I had one that Barry signed for me, and I had an extra, so I'm going to give this to your congregation, because there are 8 key polarities. And how many of you are interested in having this congregation thrive? Well, there are a lot of answers in here, and I'm sure you probably have a lot of these, but this will be a way that y'all could work on these over time to very systematically grow and strengthen your church family. So this is a gift for you. Yeah. How did I have 2 copies, right? It must have been. What would you say, Papa? Would you like one at that time? There we go. So what I want to do next, and this is really to sort of tee things up, is to take one of these issues that you gave a minute ago around things that get people polarized and see how it works and how you can use this map as a way to see the whole picture. And not only for you to see the whole picture, but a way for you to draw people to you rather than, getting a fight or a power struggle about who's right or who's wrong. So what I did was I'm going to take, let's see which one I want to take. let's take, masks. Or you wanna take vaccines, which one do you want to take? That'd be the same. Let's just, masks and vaccines, we'll put them together, how about that? So for me, the two competing values or poles, as I call them, that underlie those problems of like whether we're a mask or not, whether to get a vaccine or not, that are the crux of the conflict in our country is freedom. Y'all hear that? And then there's regulation.
Stupid versus,
Pardon me?
stupid versus.
Now I want you to. So I would say that you prefer the regulation pole.
Definitely.
Okay, okay. Well, I'm going to suggest that those that we disagree with, and of course, in your opinion, that they, in fact, value freedom. And that to say it's freedom or regulation is a false choice. It will set up a win-lose fight. And what we know about win-lose over time is it actually devolves into lose-lose. And nobody in the system wins. And each of us are part of what? The system in this country. And we can't escape it unless we leave. All right? So let's explore the whole picture and see if maybe we can open our hearts and minds to learn a way to have these conversations that are less challenging and more collaborative, more communal, more inclusive, yes. Respectful, all the above. Exactly. So, I'll tell you what, we're going to come back to the GPS, the greater purpose statement, in just a minute. We're going to start and just talk about these individual poles or values. So what we're trying to do is, well, no, we better do this first. We better do this first. GPS. So what do you think the people who value freedom and people who value regulation, what do you think they might agree with in terms of vaccines or masks and that sort of thing? What do you think everybody might say they might want at the end of the day? Something really kind of high level, like
If you don't do it, you die.
okay, so down here be your die.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to put that around.
This is on which side?
Well, we're going to go down here to the bottom first, but we'll come back to that. I'm not certain about that yet. So let me give an example of something that might bring people together is that they want to
Be able to get together and do things together.
Yeah.
Activity.
get together and be together. How about that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a really good one. I think that's something that people could get behind. Because what you're looking for is that instead of this being a this versus that, it changes the line of sight to where this group looks up here and this group looks up here, right? And if we all look up there together, like, oh wow, we found something that what? Common ground. Wasn't common ground on your website too? I believe it was. All right. So what are some of the positives when we're thinking about the vaccines and the mandate and the vaccines and the mask? What do you think are some of the positives of freedom in America? What are some of the positive results that we get by focusing on freedom in America? Pardon? Choice. People have, so they have choice. Choices. What are some other positives of freedom?
I don't know, it's the same thing, self-direction.
Self-direction, okay. Self-direction. Independence.
Democracy.
I'm sorry, what?
Democracy.
All right, democracy.
Part of a wonderful group.
So democratic principles are being lived and honored.
Fulfillment.
Fulfillment in what way?
You're able to choose what you want to be and become that.
Okay. So do you feel that personal fulfillment? So let's flip the coin on the other side, right? So what might be some positives if we want to get together, be together as Americans? Because we're not even talking outside of the country. We're still about Americans, right? From regulation of these kinds of things. What are some of the positive results from regulation?
Safety.
Increase safety.
Health.
All right. Increased safety,
Increased health.
increased health.
Childhood vaccinations have saved many
What are some other positive results?
Community,
Pardon me?
community,
All right, what about the community?
I'm thinking about public health, in other words, you can,
Yeah.
if people are healthy, they can get it.
Okay. So thinking about others.
Yep.
Okay. So this one over here, I'm just gonna, independence has to do about, thinking about self, right?
Yeah.
And community is thinking about others, so this is interdependence. Does that make sense?
But it includes others, I think it's.
What, Mary Sue?
It includes others.
Yes, it includes others, absolutely. So we know we notice our interdependency. What's another positive result of regulation?
Safety.
We got safety here. How about less deaths, less infections, is there fear?
Healthy community.
Healthy community, we got increased health.
They pick up the garbage.
So,
By regulation, so that's safety.
around masks and, vaccines, help me with that.
Okay, with mask and vaccine.
Mhm.
Well,
What are some of the positive regulations?
Increase
do we have more
knowledge, increase knowledge,
Increased knowledge, we have more self-confidence,
with scientific.
we have less fear.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
science,
Yeah. Science, yeah, science.
science, evidence-based.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm coming back to there was a hand up and I'm coming right back as soon as I can write this down. If I don't write it down when I do, it's gone. Yes, ma'am. Pardon me?
It seems like I'm jumping to the other side, but, regulation to me means increased freedom.
In what way?
I feel safer.
Okay, so this is about feeling safer.
Yeah, but, you know,
That's okay. Because it is related to that. Because we know there's what? An and here, right? So what if all we did in this country was focus when it comes to masks and vaccines, if all we did was say, freedom is the way. We gotta be free. And we said, no regulation. No regulation, no, this is America, we are freedom, no regulation. What are some of the negatives that we might get? What?
Chaos.
What?
Chaos.
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 Hospitalizations, I heard somebody say. Chaos. George?
Sickness,
Sickness, right?
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah.
Death.
Loss of relationship.
Increased deaths. What else?
Loss of relationship.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
Loss of relationships, maybe even in your own families, right? I know some people, and they say, well, my children won't get it, right? Won't get the shot, won't wear a mask. So loss of relationships, what else?
Unemployment.
Unemployment.
Burden on the healthcare system.
Burden the healthcare system.
And education.
What about education?
yeah,
Burden on education.
Healthcare and education.
yeah.
Okay? So let's flip the coin. I'm telling you, we have got to regulate. This is not a time for freedom in this country. We have got to regulate. This is all about regulation. This is not about individual freedom. No individual freedom, all regulation. What might happen? What are some of the negatives we might get if all we did was we over-focused on regulation and we did not focus on freedom at all?
We're all supplies.
Pardon me?
Our whole supply chain for safety and health and whatever was lost.
So supply chain goes down as performance
We
goes
didn't have
down.
enough things to be safe.
The economy, right?
Isolation.
Isolation,
Loss of entrepreneurship.
loss of entrepreneurship,
Some more autocratic.
autocratic,
Less democratic.
less democratic. What else?
Anger.
Anger about what?
Control.
Forced to wear masks, forced to do things they don't want to do. That's more on the freedom side, isn't it?
The downside of regulation is the anger where you are being forced to,
Control.
yeah, control. Yeah. You know, a lot of rules, right? I mean, burden.
Well, less of thinking. Yeah.
What?
Less people are thinking anymore.
Oh, Mindless.
Yes,
Robots.
right.
Do this.
Mindless robots.
Yeah.
We're just working for the state.
Do it.
Communism.
I didn't say that.
All right, so y'all get the picture, right?
Yeah.
So the reason I thought it'd be great to use this one is that what we know in a both and world and on this map is that if I value, and if I value freedom, right, and I see the positives associated with my preference, I am also most likely to see what's wrong with the other preference and be blind to the other positives, the very different positives that this gives me that are needed to sustain this over time. The reverse is also true. So if I'm in favor of regulation, I see what's wrong with too much freedom and no regulation. So this is how we get into arguments, because we're saying, I'm for freedom, well, I'm for regulation, I'm for freedom, I'm for science, I'm for freedom, and you're just not thinking about the fact that maybe there is a gift in both sides of the coin. And when you think about, I don't know what school you were raised in, but I was in the public schools of Charleston County, we never learned both and thinking. We weren't taught it. I wasn't taught it. I had 18 years of education in South Carolina. Never once did anybody tell me that this is how you look at a complex issue. So here's the secret. This is the takeaway. Is once you can see the whole thing, you just have to assume that the person that you're talking to, whether it's a family member, somebody you work with, that they probably don't see the whole. They probably see their view and not your view. So let's say, and I'm just going to make this assumption, I don't know if it's accurate or not, I'm making it. Let's just say that the people in this room today generally prefer regulation over freedom. Okay? That's what I'm going to say. So if you're trying to get somebody who values freedom to also supplement freedom with regulation, not replace it, supplement it, the way you do that is you first, do you know what it feels like when you get in that little tension with somebody? Or let's just say a mask or a vaccine. Our natural tendency is to what? Sell them. Let me tell you why you need to wear that mask. Let me tell you why you need to get that vaccine. You give them all these absolutely true reasons, yes? And so what happens when you sell them? What do? Defend them. They defend themselves, you get resistance, and they what? Push back, okay? So instead of starting with your point of view, which you are intimately familiar, you start with their point of view. And so this person said, well, I believe in freedom to choose and blah, blah, blah. I say, well, so, and you have to do this authentically. You can't be like goofing with them, right? You start over here. So this is where you start. This is where you go first. And you authentically listen and hear and understand what their reasons are for their preferred value or pole. Do you know what people do when they feel heard and understood? What do? They become softer because you're softening, they're softening. So number one, you do this. Number two, you come over here and you say, well, now that I understand these values, tell me what are some of the things that you're afraid of if we bring all this regulation into play. Okay? So what you've done is you have now totally heard and appreciated, not denied or argued with or called dumb or wrong, their values, fear, point of view. And so as people are heard, particularly on what they value and what they fear, then they are more open to what? So just imagine that I'm spending this is a one-on-one conversation. Let's just imagine that we're having this. And maybe you're taking notes, because you know what? That might be a good thing to do with your energy instead of what? Feeling like you need to be right. Exactly, okay? So let's say take a little note. So you think this and think, wow, this is really great. I hadn't thought about that. Thank you. Can you get any more examples? And not, not put them on the defensive, but just really seek to understand. So the beauty of this is when people feel heard and understood about their values and what they fear, then you can start saying things like, this is true, and I make that 3 syllables. I make this 3 syllables, and I'm also seeking and hoping for ways to increase our safety, our recognizing our community as a whole, and base things on science and evidence. And so in that conversation, you may not change them in a second, but you give them something to think about. And just remember, if they start getting defensive with you and they start naming all these things that's wrong with your point of view, you can say, yeah, you know what, you're exactly correct. What if we put this all together and try to figure out a way in this community of ours, or our family, to have some steps that we can take to make sure that people feel like they're independent and they've got some self-determination, while also thinking about the community and others. How might we do that? Right? So just imagine if when this happened in the United States, when the pandemic happened, that we started having these kinds of conversations instead of people going out and screaming at each other and telling them how wrong they were. So what I'm going to ask you to do is take just a few more minutes. We've got 7 minutes. We're in good shape. Take a few more minutes. Go back to the people you were talking with. And what I want you to do, and then we're going to share these. Just take a few minutes. What are some of the insights or the ahas that you've had just by seeing this polarity map? Okay? Take about 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
Talk about any insights from this doing this mapping process.
We're all kind of in the same boat. Everything's got its importance. And in one
Well, rested now?
Well, that's your pen.
Okay. All right.
I'm thinking this at the individual conversation level, but if you would there ever be, if you wanted to do something in groups, that would be different.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about groups, it's just individual.
But this is just for the moment. This is fine.
Yes, and we've got Catherine and
God told me.
So it's about 30 seconds, okay, about 30 more seconds.
Which I have.
Okay, folks, let me pull this back together. I want to read to you from a few books, but before we do that, any kind of like big insights that came from this for you?
We think you saved our Thanksgiving from us not killing people.
From not killing?
Maybe.
Yeah, figuratively, of course.
I mean, and I've got to tell you, what if you worked on Polarity Map together? I'm not kidding. Because
Turkey versus ham for Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Basically, so much an insight, but just a question about how do you, regardless of what side you're on, if that person's basis for their being on whatever side of it is based on false information or inaccurate information.
I don't see inaccurate information on either of these.
They fail to see the negative.
Well,
I'm thinking about that. So,
or that's if you're on the freedom side.
yeah.
And they're giving their information about not getting the vaccine is based on inaccurate information.
Facebook.
Oh, I understand what you're talking about, right? Well, we're not asking them about, there wouldn't be anything that would be false on here. This is about getting ready to have the conversation so that they feel like they're not being told they're wrong. Okay? Because both of these are accurate, they're just incomplete.
If they said, well, more people are dying from getting the vaccine than having COVID.
So that would go, so they would say, if we focus on regulation, more people would die. Here's your point. Okay. More people would die from getting the vaccine instead of people that are unvaccinated. Well, then that would open up curiosity for me, which would be, I would love to see the data where you got that, because I've not heard that. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because when somebody resists you in that way, and it's something that in your belief, and it's your belief now, it's not proven yet, it's your belief just as much as it's theirs, get curious. Get curious about what they're asking. I don't mean, why are you saying that? I mean, just get curious and say, wow, I hadn't heard of that. Let's find that together. Does that help? Okay.
And both sides can argue that the basis of what they're arguing for is based in news sources. I mean, we're all influenced.
Right. We all are on all sides. So, I've got a couple things. I've got a couple books if y'all, these are some books of Barry Johnson's. This one just came out like 2 years ago. And he put a supplement in here. He goes, am I going to support Black Lives Matter or All Lives Matter? This false choice is less polarizing if or is replaced with and. Black Lives Matter and all lives matter. It is precisely because all lives matter that disproportionate attacks on and incarceration of Black people matters. So in this book, he talked, and this is just so fantastic. He had a book out since 1992 when this came out. But this is all about how you do this. And he even put one in the back in this back chapter, winning on two fronts, health and economy. Imagine if we gave that to, I didn't say that. And then this book just came out a few months ago, and this is volume 2. And so while this is the principles and the way to do this, these are actually practitioners from around the country who've used both in thinking. And I will just say that in, let's see, chapter, what chapter is this? Okay, I'll take the page number, 187, Margaret Seidler. And with many devoted help here, George and Bob, and Rebecca and Catherine, who came in the wake of the Mother Emanuel massacre. And I want to acknowledge that Polly Shepard, who's one of my dear friends and a survivor of the massacre, is here today. We started what's called the Charleston Illumination Project, and we've got people from all different walks of life to come in and do a polarity map on individual rights and public safety. And they gave the police department, Chief Greg Mullen, about 2,000 pieces of feedback that got turned into 86 strategies of what the police and citizens could do to improve those relationships that we don't have a polarization in that community. And it became a national model. So anyway, that's in there too. And then the last thing is, if you want something really simple, this is my book that came out in 2008. Particularly if you're looking at people that are your family. And so I wrote this little book about this beautiful historic city somewhere in the southeastern coast of the United States. And it was about electric utility. And this woman had become the head of it because the person who was grooming her had died with a big Category 4 hurricane just 6 days off the coast. And her and her executive team, their strengths turned into their weaknesses because they didn't see polarity. So that's the story. The gold in this book is that some colleagues of mine around the country, we identified 98 different things that individuals or leaders could prefer. And since you generally have a blind spot to the other pole, in the back of the book in the appendices, we have 98 polarities that individuals often need to manage with others, right? So that's in there too. So I think the real key, to summarize and let y'all get on with, we'll stay with you if we may for the service, is to recognize that when you run up against hard energy, a hard stance, is our natural thing is to defend ourselves. And what I'm going to suggest is, as long as somebody doesn't have a gun, right, to defend ourselves is to really soften yourself and get curious and really try and understand where they're coming from. Because just understanding and seeing the whole picture and that this person actually sees that there's some benefits of the other side, then leaves the opportunity and the potential and the possibility for creating steps forward to actually move past polarization to some sort of common understanding and unity, even if we're not completely sold on either side, but we actually need both over time. So thank you, George, for inviting me.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure to be with you. We love you.